Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you, colleagues, for your attention. Mr. Speaker, this is an issue. House Bill 1947 addresses an issue which I find troubling beyond belief. The sexual abuse of children is one of the most hideous crimes that I can imagine. I want to commend my friend from Berks County for standing up, for being brave, for talking about his own personal experience. And for not being ashamed about it. He deserves our respect. He deserves our admiration for standing up for his fellow Pennsylvanians who have gone through what we heard yesterday. Has to be one of the most traumatic things that can ever happen to any child. My heart breaks when I think of any child going through this. I can't imagine. I don't have any children myself. Can't imagine what I would do if this happened to one of my children. But I know that if I were a parent, and even now not being a parent, when I hear about this happening to children, I would personally like to chase the perpetrator to the ends of the earth, drag him back, string him up, and let the victims have their way with them. That's my emotions talking. And we don't make law by emotion. We have to follow the rule of law. We have to follow a logical, legal path to make law. I want to address these perpetrators. I want them to be punished for what they did to innocent children. However, the amendment that was offered yesterday and approved by this body raises a serious constitutional conundrum for me. And it raises an issue, because it's retroactive, it raises an issue with Pennsylvania Constitution's Remedies Clause. Now, the Remedies Clause is sort of obscure, and it's hard to understand the full weight of the Remedies Clause of the Pennsylvania Constitution simply by reading the language of the Constitution, because this is something that has been set by court precedent, and it's over 100 years now we've been following the Remedies Clause. To my untrained legal eye, House Bill 1947, as amended, looks like it violates the Remedies Clause. And I'm sure that there are lawyers who can explain this a lot better than me, but what I understand it, the Remedies Clause to be is this, is that once a statute of limitations has expired, the Supreme Court has ruled that there is a certain vested right that has been earned by a potential offender. And let me say, I'm not in favor of giving rights to these offenders. I'm not. However, we often see people use the rights they have horribly, yet we don't move to strike their rights. I can give you plenty of examples of how that happens. So, the Remedies Clause is a bit obscure in trying to understand it. And I know I'm kind of I like the Constitution. I like to read it. I like to understand what it means. This remedies clause to me is a bit unfamiliar. And it's only come to my attention recently. And I wonder, Mr. Speaker, how many other members are not completely familiar with the remedies clause and how it might apply to House Bill 1947 as amended. But I think it's important that we have time to think about that. I've got a couple letters here from very, very respected legal scholars on this issue, and they say that what we've done with House Bill 1947 as amended would absolutely violate the remedies clause. We have a duty here in the legislature. We can't just say, well, let's let the courts sort it out. We are a co-equal branch. We've all taken an oath to the Constitution, and it is our duty. It falls upon us to decide whether something is constitutional or not before we pass it out. And here's why that's important, Mr. Speaker, because once we pass a bill out of this chamber, out of the General Assembly, the courts in Pennsylvania will assume that we acted in a constitutional manner. So it is up to us to take the time to decide whether what we've done by amending House Bill 1947 is constitutional or not. We have that duty here. We can't just leave it to the courts to figure out. And while I'm not convinced enough, I could stand here and ask for a motion on constitutionality. I think that would be short-sighted and would be insulting to all my colleagues who need to make up their own minds. I think we need to move on this issue of going after child sexual predators who have caused irreparable harm to many of our citizens. I think we need to move forward. We need to punish those offenders to the fullest extent we can. However, I think we need to do it in a constitutional manner. And I think we need to have time to decide for every member to examine the remedies clause and use their own best judgment as to whether House Bill 1947 as amended does comply with the remedies clause. So at this time, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to move that final consideration on House Bill 1947 be postponed until May 17th. That gives us 30 days, Mr. Speaker.